works for the Resilient Communities team for Green Adelaide. Is involved in projects including seeds, which support schools to be stewards for endangered flora species, delivering a partnership with the SAC Conservation Centre, and coordinates the Green Adelaide Seminar Series program of talks, which provide a 1-hour online talk each month to open to community members and staff. So I'll let her talk about her background and her interests, and I'm very keen to welcome you today.
Thanks, Janet. Hi, everyone. Thanks for that introduction, Janet. Thanks for the invitation to come and speak with you today. I'm not really sure what to share about myself. I was thinking when I was sitting there, I love insects and invertebrates, but I'm not an expert by any means. I'm an amateur enthusiast, I guess, and I'm loving the more that I learn, the more excited that I get. I was probably introduced to the importance of butterflies and their plant associations by an expert, and I'm not sure what kind of type of expert she would consider herself, up in Woodford in Queensland. There's this group, there's a 500-acre property up there, and these volunteers called the Tree Huggers who go once a month to look after the land. And there was this fabulous woman who was a butterfly, well, she was actually an invertebrate specialist, but everyone knew her as the butterfly specialist. And she really helped me to understand the importance that one particular plant lost from the ecosystem can impact one animal that then becomes lost from there, and the importance of those biodiversity and connections. And so from there, that was about 10 years ago, I've started learning more, but I'm certainly, my knowledge is probably this compared to you in that area. Some things that I maybe know a little bit more about is compost and soil health. I'm an absolute avid soil health nutter. I love the life in the soil and learning about the bacteria and the fungi and the protozoa and the nematodes that all work together so we can have healthy food systems and ecosystems. And I've come to work at Green Adelaide with a public health background. So I see everything that I do from a public health perspective. And I guess what that has meant is that I have a very big picture, and I haven't been able to dive down too deep in any one area. But water sensitive urban design, or water smart homes and gardens, is a new kind of area of interest for myself. I come today to share with you information that has been put together by Water Sensitive SA and a woman called Melissa Bradley. Just so I know before I get started and kind of get into the session, who's ever heard of this idea of water sensitive urban design as a term? Okay, a few people? All right, great, all right, so we'll get started. So hi, my name is Nat Gifney. I have this amazing role title, Sustainable Urban Communities Officer. I absolutely love it. And I love it because there's so many different things that can come under this idea of sustainable urban communities that cover Green Adelaide's vision, which we'll get into, which is Cooler, Greener, Wilder. A Cooler, Greener, Wilder Adelaide. I acknowledge that we are meeting on Kaurna lands, Ninamani, Nai Nat. Hello, how are you? My name is Nat. I acknowledge the Kaurna elders, past and present, and acknowledge that this is Kaurna land, always has been Kaurna land, and I really acknowledge the damage that's been done to this land by modern Western ways of living and eating, and the big job we have to try and undo some of that damage. And I think what we're talking about today, water smart homes and gardens, is one little piece of that puzzle that we can do to help improve our landscapes and get them back to functioning slightly more how they should in their natural way. So I'm assuming everyone knows Green Adelaide because you've had people come and speak here before from Green Adelaide, so I don't need to really explain who we are. But yeah, that's our vision. And I think the cooler, greener, wilder water is just such a fundamental, important part of this picture. So when we're looking at what we're talking about today, we're looking at homes, but this is really part of broader work that's happening on council levels and regional levels and city scale, strategies and solutions for us to use water more efficiently and be more integrated in how we use water. So this is what I'm going to attempt to cover today. What is the context? Why is this important? And what are some of these solutions that we can look at inside the home and outside of the home? Now, when I've done water smart homes and gardens before in previous kind of roles I've got a big background in growing food and working with Permaculture South Australia and supporting people to have food gardens. Water smart kind of gardens for me has been all about the drip irrigation and the mulching and those sorts of things. That's not actually part of this talk. This is actually looking more at the design elements and how can we have systems in place so that just our homes are set up from the beginning to be smarter in the way that they use water. But first, I'm curious what you think, because there's lots of different motivations around this. Why should we have water smart homes and gardens? And some of that you might think that's really obvious, but there's quite a breadth and a holistic kind of array of motivations, I think. So with the person next to you or around you, see if you can come up with 3 different reasons for why have water smart homes and gardens. I'm going to give you 60 seconds, roughly. Okay, so that's probably over 60 seconds. Collectively, I'm sure we've come up with a really great list together. Jan, what was your group? What's one thing from your group?
Well, one I mentioned in particular was trying to get the rainwater that comes out off your roof into your, usually just go straight into the street to try and get it into the garden before it, if you've got too much, but to try and recycle that.
Yeah, okay, so trying to capture rainwater and get it into the garden. Great. Excellent. So, yeah.
We had saving financially,
Yeah, so saving money.
reducing your footprint to recharge the land, limiting external infrastructure, harmony, indirect or direct effect on the River Murray ecosystem, local trees.
Great. I like that. And I love that you have the paper there and you're getting right into that. Anyone have something else that wasn't said then, or a different way of saying something?
Well, now that we haven't got any rain, we have to be smart because there's no rain.
Yeah, so our rain patterns are changing. Yeah, absolutely.
Recharging the aquifer.
Yeah, recharging the aquifer. So that means we need the water to actually land on soil or have a way to get back into the soil system. Yeah.
Taking energy from not pumping as much water.
Yeah, using water more at the source of where it is, so that we're not having to transport it distances. Yep, saves energy.
I think if we have water smart, then we have better plants because they're not being overwatered or underwatered.
Oh yeah.
And you could have like native plants. The first thing I did when I came from England was to overwater everything and kill everything. So I think water smart can involve using appropriate water levels for the plants.
I like that.
I'm just basically aware we're in a very fragile situation. It wouldn't take much for our civilization to collapse.
Yeah.
And so whatever we're doing within the microenvironment, would this collapse if we don't have everything else that comes in?
And I'm sure everyone in this room would have lived through droughts where we've had restrictions on when we can water and when we can't. So we do have quite a fragility to our system, but we actually have some security with the saltwater desalination plant, which is actually there ready to meet needs if we needed it. It's very energy intensive, so we don't use it unless it's actually needed, but that's been working in operation since it was established, despite a lot of people thinking it was just shelved and never used. It is in operation, it is producing very high quality water, but it uses a lot of energy.
There's also a potential risk, sorry. The shellfish and stuff actually all hatch at the same time. If too much saline was released, it could actually wipe out the whole population. This is work by Friends of Gulf St Vincent. They protested about it, and that's why the protests at the time.
Yeah. With all the things we do, there's pros and cons and things we need to mitigate and manage, isn't there? So I think there's been a really good list, and some more of these ideas will come out, but our motivations for doing this, I think, are quite interesting. What I realised, my main motivation is about sustaining urban landscapes, getting that moisture back into the soil, into the system, to mimic most closely the natural water hydrological system, so that we can have from our bacteria in the soil alive and thriving, because they are the base of the food system, that all of our bigger invertebrates somehow feed back off that, the life in the soil and all the life around. So when we have dry landscapes, we're not supporting all of the ecosystem. It's just, so something to me about that the language they used, sustaining urban systems, which is really different from the councils and the policy writers and the governments. What do you think their main focus is on water smart homes and gardens? Why are they putting legislation in place and some funding? What's their main motivation?
Votes.
No.
Reducing the amount of water we use.
Yeah, partly. It's actually around flood mitigation. Yeah, so the local government to manage the amount of stormwater that they have to now in peak rain events is a real challenge. Yeah, so where they're requiring now new builds to have rainwater tanks, but the motivation isn't because of these other reasons we might have said. It's really about that managing stormwater systems. But that's okay. We can get some really great outcomes that can benefit other things. You know, sometimes just knowing the drivers, I think, is important. So absolutely, predictions are we're going to have a lot less water, probably quite soon. Yeah, so this is the Department of Environment and Water's information. And they're predicting around a third less water into our main reservoir, potentially 50% less, in not too long, in the 36 to 65 kind of time. This is all predictions, we don't know. Climate change is actually getting more unpredictable. But this is kind of what is estimated. So we are going to have a lot less water. So we're going to have to
have more people too.
Yeah, more people. We'll have to be more clever with how we use it, more efficient with how we use it. And I really hope some of the things we're going to talk about tonight just become, they're such common sense that they just become part of the way we build our homes and design our homes. So yeah, we'll have less rain overall, and we'll probably have bigger rain events less often. Now you probably know Adelaide is declared the world's second national park city, and I put this image in here because this is for me why I think water sensitive homes and gardens as part of water sensitive or water smart suburbs is so important, because we want all the life in the ecosystem, the birds and the bees and the butterflies and the lizards and the animals and the bacteria to be thriving, and they need water to do that. So there's principles of water sensitive urban design. I've got a lot to get through. I'm going to skip over some things, and you'll just have to trust me that I'm trying to fit in as much as I can. But really it's about reintegrating water into the landscapes, using it as close as possible to where we've captured it, so we reduce that pumping, protecting our water quality, our river water quality. When we have those big storm events, all that water rushing through our stormwater system into our rivers degrades our river system. Yes, we get erosion and things. So it's really important that we help reduce the peak flow demand into the stormwater system. So a lot of these ideas about just slowing water down a bit. We might have the same volume coming off our property and into the stormwater system, but if we can just slow it down, we do help councils in their hard job of managing stormwater, but we help protect our rivers. And we are trying to reintroduce platypus into the river, so we can use the platypus as some of the hooks, like you use the butterfly as a hook with people. We're using, you know, the fact that the platypus with a hook with kids and community around protecting our rivers. So we know, despite the fact we've got less water coming, if we just look at that natural water cycle, I'm sure you are all across this is quite simple stuff, but generally, if we had water falling in on a forest, and the more densely planted, the more dense that forest is, the more water would actually kind of stay in that system. So in this thought experiment, we can have 10 million litres of water coming down into the forest. Around 85% of that would be evaporated back up. Some of it would just be evaporated off the surface. Some of it would have gone into the soil, been taken up by the trees, and then perspired or transpired and be evaporated off the surface of the trees and what's called transevaporation. But most of that would go back up into the atmosphere. Most of these slides aren't mine. I wouldn't ever say it's lost to the air. I'd say it's returned to the air. It's not lost, it's part of the natural system. It's just returned back to where it should be. What are we doing now with a sort of urban concrete jungles? It's kind of inversed. So now we have about 85% of that would be going straight out. We've gotten very good at getting water very quickly away and into concrete channels and out to streams and out to the ocean. So we've lost a lot of that water from where it fell. And so in the natural system, some of that water would go into the soil, and a little bit of it would make its way out to the streams, but most of it would stay in that local area. What are we seeing more of? Of course, more concrete, more impervious surfaces, more black concrete, black roofs, these hot urban island infill developments. I know there's some real benefits of high density housing, and I won't go into that, but what kind of breaks my heart is all this impervious surface where we know water's going to hit, there's no vegetation, and it's going to be taken away. What we would love, this is kind of the utopia, if we would have systems where water was really valued and we designed our houses and properties in a way where water could be captured, and with overflows that then have another system that's going to capture that bit, and it's going to all kind of absorb into the land and be able to sustain our urban systems, our urban plants and vegetation. So there's lots going on there. We're going to talk about some of these ideas today. And so this is how a lot of the solutions are categorized. And this is coming from, more of a policy engineering kind of perspective. But it is about how do we reduce the volume of water that's lost from our homes? How do we reduce the flow? So if it is going to leave our home, how do we slow it down in those big rain events? How do we ensure better quality of water? If it is going into the stormwater, how do we ensure that there's a good quality water coming off of our properties? And how are we just more efficient with the water that we use? And this next one, lots of information on here, but on the left we've got different solutions we're going to look at. And it's just about acknowledging some solutions have multiple benefits in this kind of way that we can understand them. Some of them both slow water down, captured at the site. I think this is probably too much information, but we'll just jump into the ideas. Okay, so water sensitive urban design in the home, or water smart solutions for inside the home. Now the first one they have in this training, as I said, this is from Water Sensitive SA, is actually a rainwater tank. I think, well, that's outside the home. But it's actually a really important way that we can have water to use inside of our homes. Who here has a rainwater tank? Okay. What are you using your rainwater tank for?
Everything. I've got no names.
Okay, so okay, so you're using it for everything. Who uses it just to water the garden? Yeah, so that's when my auntie, when I grew up, she had a rainwater tank and it was used to water the garden. That was my kind of experience. Who's using it to flush the toilet? One. You're using it for everything. Everything. What else are you using yours for, James?
It goes to 2 toilets and a laundry.
2 toilets and a laundry, yep. Anyone else using it for something other than the garden?
Yeah, hot water.
Hot water, great.
Kitchen and bathroom and hot water.
Kitchen, bathroom, hot water, great. So this was a real revelation to me to realise that when we have rainwater tanks, I'll just jump to the next slide. This graph, what it's showing is, this is how much water is going, is what the balance of the rainwater tank is. So in our top example, it's probably a 3,000 litre water tank. We can see it's basically always full. And it's kind of getting discharged and some water's getting used, but it's generally always full. Once it's kind of hit peak height, if there's rainwater trying to get into it, that's going out the overflow and probably down into the stormwater system. They call that overspill. We've kind of lost the opportunity to capture that rainwater because our tanks were full. But when I was a kid, I thought that's what you wanted. You wanted a full tank because it was kind of a safety net that if you needed water, you had water. And that's totally okay. If your motivation for having a rainwater tank is security, that if there was no access to water, you want water, then a full rainwater tank is going to make you very happy. But what I've realised, generally speaking, we want an empty rainwater tank because we always want that rainwater tank ready and available to take the next lot of rain. So we're going to be getting bigger rain events less often. So we want to make sure we've got as much room as possible in our tanks to be able to collect that next rainwater. So in order to have an empty rainwater tank, we need to be using it. And we'll have a look at some tables about how much we can save and what you might hook them up to. So there's no rights or wrongs, there's just different opportunities. They all come with different costs. But I think it's quite interesting. For me, that was a real aha moment to realise, I want an empty rainwater tank, not a full one. So, and flushing it down the toilet can be a really good use of your rainwater. Yeah?
Does Green Adelaide advocate plastic tanks or metal?
I don't think we have a stance. Yeah. What's your view on that?
Okay, we'll keep.
What's your view on?
We're
what's
having
your
a
view?
bit of a discussion on the pros and cons of it.
Okay.
So there's not a view
Bringing
yet.
a plant nursery,
Uh-huh.
plant nursery, we're bringing some big tanks.
Yes.
There's some,
I thought plastic were pretty much the standard now. Yeah.
concrete is
Popular
suggested.
in rural areas because it burns.
Yeah.
Yes, that was,
Right.
that was the point.
Okay. But if you have a rainwater system, and it is to be able to use inside your house for your hot water system and your toilet, hot water system is the #1 way you can save, like, is your biggest use of water in your house. So that's if you're just going to do one thing. But if you want to put water into your hot water system, it's going to have to be very clean and of a very high quality. So it requires more filtrations and more things in place.
The other real challenge is the pressure from a rainwater tank versus conventional water can be a real issue.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
The key thing here, I'm not sure if I like this slide, but you will need to have a whole lot of things in place to clean and filter your water, starting with leaf traps and mosquito nets and different things. And the first flush diverter is one that Melissa talks very strongly about, and I've got a better photo of that later. But this is basically when the first rain that comes off your roof in your gutters in a rain event is diverted down something else, just to get that first, just any kind of silt or things or pollutions or leaves that have landed in your gutters. Yes, kind of washed away.
We've sort of had some discussions,
Mhm.
because we've got the problem of avgas being near the airport. Is,
You're near the airport.
yeah.
Well, luckily
So
we're getting
that's what
electric
we-
planes soon. Funny, about a year ago I said to my partner, I was like, we're going to have electric planes soon. He's like, no, that's at least 20 years away. We're already starting to get them. So of course it's going to take a while to that's
Because that's
completely
been
over.
one thing, I mean, all the other things on what you can do, we haven't heard of any way of having to deal with that contamination that comes from the air
Yeah.
into it.
So this is where I'm just, not an expert. I will happily share what I think I know, and I'll happily tell you when I just don't have knowledge in an area, but it's one I'm happy to ask Melissa if she's come up against that.
Because it's the one thing that we've been,
Yeah,
because it'd be lovely to have a rainwater tank, but we just
Yeah.
connect it
yeah,
to poison then.
yeah. So when deciding the size of your tank, it will be determined by many things, but it is really worth, if you're really interested in having a rainwater tank, to know that really thinking about the size is important. And it comes down to how big your roof is, how much of your roof can you actually hook up and sync up to get to your rainwater tank. Are you going to have multiple rainwater tanks? One that collects water on one side of the house, maybe that's used for something, maybe on this side of the house it's going to be used in the toilet. There's different ways to approach it, but just working it out first before investing money is a really sensible idea. And there's lots of information and help on the Water Sensitive SA website to help work this out. But I'm just going to show one little table, and I know there's lots of information here, but it's an example of having a look. If we just look, I'm just going to move. So at the end here, we're envisioning we're considering a 2,000 litre water tank on a roof, 100 square metres of roof. And if we were to use just a dual flush toilet and the laundry front loader only, this is saying that our needs for those two things in the house will be met 77% of the time. Yeah, so we'd still need to use some mains for those two things, but the 3/4 of the time roughly, we would be able to use our toilet and laundry from our rainwater tank. Now, if we were to go up to, 2.5 times that size, we're actually only getting a little bit of increase there. But we could also, instead of going up in rainwater tank size, maybe we connect up the other side of the house and we've now got 200 square metres of roof. So depending on what you're aiming for, you can work out with these charts, once you know how big your roof is and what parts you're considering linking up, because sometimes it's harder to get all of your roof together and there's closed systems and open systems. But this can help work out, depending on what you're wanting to use it for, what size tank you really need to consider, depending on what your aims are for how much you would like to be using rainwater for. So this is all available online.
So, does it say how many people need to live in a
Oh,
house?
sorry.
It did say 3 people.
Yeah, 3 people in this one. Yeah. You're welcome to take photos, because I do as well when I'm in a presentation, but I'll make sure this information's all available to you. So that can be really helpful. So, look, we can look at it more. This is now thinking of a 4-person household, 100 square metres of rooftop. Do you know what your square meterage is on your rooftop, James?
What I've got going into it is
Into
about
the rainwater
100
tank?
square
About
metres.
100, yeah.
And that's a 10,000 litre tank.
Wow, yeah, okay. How often is it getting full?
Until I put too much on the garden, I hadn't used it all in the first, since I've used it until literally 6 or 8 weeks ago.
Wow, wow. So we can look at how much we could save, but you can see the top one there, 40,000 of litres of water estimated by having it into your hot water system. So that's where your greatest savings can be made. Or if we had a bigger tank, 10,000 litres with 180 square metres of roof, which a lot of houses are that bigger size. I know our house is about 100 square metres, but I know 180 isn't unheard of. That is quite normal for a lot of Adelaide houses. You'd then be able to get some quite more significant savings there. If you actually to quantify though how much money you're saving, I don't know if it always stacks up. This is where it comes down to what's motivating us. Is it about living more ecologically? Is it a values-based motivation? Yeah. So with the urban infill, big houses, small blocks, there's less space for rainwater tanks, but they are actually legislated to have at least 1,000 water tank now, I think, in most council areas. Unfortunately, the compliance is low. I've heard the builders just aren't putting them in and are saying that's on the responsibility of the buyer to put that in. And councils just don't have the capacity to go and check every house. Yeah, so I've heard that some councils maybe are checking about 40%, and that's at the higher end. So it's really down to the community there to be doing the right thing. But there's lots of designs and shapes, and we can get rainwater tanks that you can use almost instead of a wall, and the slimline ones, and all different ones that try and fit in little spaces that you might have.
Something that should be taken into consideration is the positioning of the tank itself.
Yes.
Because of plumbing aspects.
Yes, absolutely.
We haven't talked about that.
No.
But
Yeah.
that could be a very, very expensive and important part of
Absolutely.
the positioning of the tank.
And this is where we need to find trusted plumbers and people that can help you do that design. Yeah, absolutely. So this is the example of a first flush device here. You can have it quite simple. That will have a little hole at the bottom, and the water will just drip out of there. So every so often you'll need to unscrew the bottom and get out any leaf matter or other organic matter or things, debris that's collected in there. But it's just the first bit of water will flush into there. Once that's full, it will start running into the tank. And of course, if we have rainwater tanks, we've actually got a whole lot of maintenance we need to do. But this is part of valuing our water. Will come with a bit of work. Just like a lot of things. To live more sustainably, we often need a little bit more time in life. So I'm a big advocate of the 4-day work week, even though I work 5, 6, 7 days a week between commutes. But we all worked a little bit less. We have more time to mend our clothes and use all our food and grow some food and clean our rainwater tanks. But living well, we do need to sometimes take some time to look after things. I'm going to skip over that. So on the Water Sensitive SA website, there is so much information. This is a screenshot from their website. There's videos and how-tos and guides and all sorts of things. So if you're interested in anything I've talked about today, there will be photos and how-tos and a whole lot of things. Grey water. Who uses grey water? Yeah, great. So your grey water is any used water in your house. Black water is your toilet. Grey water is anything that you've used in the bathroom, that you wash your hands. The water that's gone down the sink is considered grey water. So your laundry, your toilet, your bathroom, kitchen, all grey water. And I really think we need to, I hope that in the future, we just think it is crazy that we lived in a society that wasn't using grey water. I really hope we get to a point, because water's so precious and we are going to have a lot less of it. And there's just such an opportunity there. There's big, expensive systems you can get that treat your grey water and allow you legally to be able to spray it around your garden above the ground surface. But they're about $8,000 to $10,000. That's just for the treatment component, not the installation. The much cheaper option is what's called a grey water diversion device or grey water diversion system. And this basically has coarse filters and it will filter out hair and other bits and pieces and filter it enough that you're legally allowed to use it subsurface. So you can irrigate it out through your garden underneath the ground. So that's a much cheaper option. You can't use your kitchen sink. The SA Health and government are very concerned about pathogens, and anything to do with food and cooking and eating is just considered high risk. So you just can't use your kitchen. I think if you had the expensive treatment system, you might be able to, but generally it's just don't worry about your kitchen sink, and you can use those other systems. Now, that's sort of a price comparison. So the grey water diversion system starts at around $750, so much cheaper than the treatment system. However, it's cheaper again because you are legally allowed to have a temporary system. So has anybody ever, I remember, hooking up the hose to the washing machine. Yep, I remember as a kid seeing my mum do that and people do that. It was kind of, I think, a bit frowned upon. Maybe it was illegal. It's legal, you can do it if it's temporary. So you don't have to get any permissions. Like we're allowed to capture water from our shower in a bucket and tip it outside. You're allowed to use that washing machine water. So you can get these kind of pre-made fancy devices, I guess, that you divert a hose from your washing machine into one of these. And it looks like a sump pump there at the bottom. And that will just automatically, if you have it turned on, pump that water out until the level gets low. So there's a range of ways of using grey water that we don't need permission for. If we want the diversion device systems, you will need council permission. If you want the treated system, there's only one that's been approved by SA Health, and that's the one that I showed you.
What's happening with the situation with reed beds? Because I looked at that a few years back.
With what, sorry?
Reed beds.
Oh, yes.
Interstate, there were various councils, and it varied right across where it was legal. In other places it wasn't.
Right.
And what I could, this is going back some years, what I could find out was it wasn't actually, looked like it wasn't quite legal here in South
Right.
Australia.
So by reed bed, do you mean kind of like a rain, like the council rain gardens with all the reeds, but on your home property?
It's for collecting grey water, so it's a passive system.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, I've seen those.
And you work through different...
I think the ones I've seen have probably never had approval. I've seen them at some
Yeah,
people's
that's-
houses. Yeah, I don't know what because I'm interested as well, can I divert, is it considered subsoil if it's going into a wicking bed? This is what I'm going to be asking.
Yeah.
Because my housemate has this vision to use our grey water to have a series of 9 wicking beds and
It actually has to go through a couple of different plant processes.
yeah.
It's a really good system, but I could not find whether it was legal here
Yeah.
in South Australia.
And some things are council by council. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have any information on that one. Other than I've seen them in action in Victoria at a friend's property. Yeah. But they probably didn't get permission.
Well, it varies across the country.
So we're using grey water. Of course, there's some things we need to consider. What are we actually putting into our system? And I found a really great, I'm quite excited by this home recipe to make a laundry detergent that actually results in water that's better for your plants. So it's actually creating a plant food. So yeah, be really conscious of what we're using. Obviously no bleaches and hair dyes. You wouldn't want to be putting kind of a whole lot of gunk down your drains if you're going to be using it on your garden. But that's good. We should be putting that stuff down our drains anyway. Yeah, so I think this makes us more aware when we're having to manage our own waste. Obviously you wouldn't water it on the same plants all the time. You would take note. The water might be a little bit more alkaline. So some plants, your berries may like that a lot more and some plants may not like that. So being really conscious of those things is important. Anyone who uses grey water have a tip for us? There's a few people that said you are using it. Any do's, don'ts, things you learnt the hard way? No?
Watch out for your pipes where it first comes out.
Okay,
I made the mistake of using some of those ripple ones and they just locked up.
okay.
Oh, the elephant's guts.
Okay, so water conservation, I'm sure you probably all are a water conscious group. And I'm sure you're aware of some of these things. Who's got a water efficient shower head? Does anyone know how many litres per minute yours is using? Whose is using 4 or less? Yeah, no? 5.5, okay. 5. We've got a 7.5. My partner wanted the 4. And I was like, ooh, I've got hair. I think if you've got long hair, generally the research, what we saw on the forums and things, people were like, yeah, the 4 litres getting a bit light on. Now, in my last rental, I was like, oh, this shower's using, I kind of could feel it was using a lot of water. I kind of joked it was like Niagara Falls under there. It was quite nice. And one day I thought, I better actually measure this. What do you think is the easiest way to measure your shower flow rate?
A big rubbish bin.
Bucket.
Yeah,
Standard.
I got a 10-litre bucket and I timed how long did it take to fill that up? 20 seconds. I was having a 30-litre a minute shower. So what, as a renter, options do you have?
You change the head yourself.
You can't, yeah? $4 is all it cost us to get one of these things called a water aerator to put in, and it slowed it down to 9 litres a minute. So for $4, we just significantly saved ourselves a whole lot of money in water. So these are great. If you don't have these, you can buy them and fit them into all sorts of taps, but I think the shower is where the real main benefit is there. Because often when you're using water in a sink or other situation, you're kind of filling up to the same amount anyway. But in the shower...
You need the jug full. We have a tap in the kitchen, which is very water saving. And I stand there, grinding my teeth. I want 2 litres of bloody water.
Our kitchen sink tap is like that as well.
Yeah.
It's very slow. It's very frustrating. Front-loading washing machines use a lot less water than top-loading washing machines. Dual flush toilets, that's just standard, And I think this shows that some of these things do take time before they become normal and just accepted and what we do. But the tap aerators, I think, are a really great one that often I didn't know about them until a few years ago. And this other one called the cold water diverter. This is an Australian invention, I was told, at least this one here is. And basically, you know how you're waiting for hot water to heat up? You can divert the water back into a different tank. I think it has like a switch where you can kind of have it off, check, no, that's still cold, and you're not wasting it down the drain. I kind of get kettles and I try to fill things up and do my best, but it's a bit of a hassle. But I just found one that's even better, which I'm excited to share. So this one, $200, you buy it once, they say it lasts for life. Watch how this one works.
This is the operation of the water saving valve. It senses the cold water from the hot water tap. You turn your hot water tap here on. All of the cold water from the hot water tap is saved back to the reservoir. When hot water is detected by the valve, it automatically switches to the hot water.
Haven't seen that one before. Love it. It's automatic.
I use a 2-bucket simple system.
Okay.
And I think my shower head is quite slow because it doesn't fill the bucket up very much before it goes hot, so it's less than half. And I use that on the garden.
Yeah, great.
I've gone against grey water because I don't want to hurt any of my plants. So the second bucket I use as I'm having a shower, and that usually gets quite a bit fuller, and then I use that on the toilet.
See, I love that, but it does rely on you being an awesome human to do it. Where we just had these in every house, but it does rely on there being a rainwater tank or something to divert that cold water to. So there is still something that's needed there.
I haven't stopped.
Yeah, it's great. But I just think that's quite exciting because it's just showing we can really kind of think differently. They estimate 10% of your water would be saved. I think that's a bit of a high estimation, but
how close do you need to be? Because I'm thinking much of the plumbing is within walls,
Yeah.
stuff like that, so it can be
True.
really hard to get to.
True.
And if you've got those water systems well spread out, now it's
Yeah.
only going to be really the kitchen and the bathroom are the two biggies.
Yeah.
You might use it in the laundry, but
Yeah.
access, how?
True.
I don't know.
You're right, and this is where retrofitting is going to be really hard, but I'm thinking,
Okay.
how, you know, if this is the norm in the future, like dual flushes and things
Yeah,
that we just have,
absolutely.
then of course we have these kind of systems in place because water is really valuable. Our water, I won't be surprised if water becomes a lot more expensive in the future. You know, this is just my, not with my Green Adelaide government hat on, but just my Nat as a community member. I just think given we're going to have less water overall, given how expensive the desal plant is, we've got the security of it, but it's expensive, we probably will have to pay more in the future. So hopefully we end up responding to that well.
And where's the reservoir and how does it get back? And does it get back into the potable system? Does it get back into
So
something?
you wouldn't be able to put it back into your potable system. It would have to go into a rainwater tank or some other reservoir you've determined. Yeah.
This is the
Okay, so that's kind of the end of our things looking inside the home. Yeah. Oh, the dishwasher.
Is that better than
Oh.
washing your dishes?
My partner swears the research says that it is, but I'm sure that the only people that have ever funded research on whether dishwashers are more efficient or not is dishwashing companies. There's no vested interest to prove that washing dishes by hand uses less water. That's inside the home, and there's lots of other things we could do. You know, we all learn to turn the tap off when we're brushing our teeth and all the things that we can do, but this is really kind of looking at more the infrastructure. So if we move outside, and I realise we've probably not got as much time for outside because we've probably used too much on inside, we're going to whip through some ideas. So the first one that this is what gets me most excited, is permeable surfaces. I don't know why I'm so excited by it. I think just because it makes such sense, and it is about getting that water into the soil where all those soil microbes are that I absolutely love. So permeable surfaces. The first tip is don't pave if you don't need to. So, you know, there's a lot of concrete, we see it everywhere, but we do need to hopefully swing back that tide that's gone to concrete everything to have more just naturally permeable surfaces. A lawn is a naturally permeable surface. We've got gravel here, or the kind of sawdust paths that are quite popular by a lot of people in gardens. They are permeable to a degree. If you are going to pave, only pave absolutely where you need. So I love this one here on the top left. You know, this is how driveways used to be. We didn't concrete the whole thing. There was just a path for where the tyres went. Yeah. Already that's, you know, half the amount of impermeable surfaces there just by actually only paving where we actually need it. That makes me a lot happier to see that than those black driveways that we see all around the place. Or given that we have a lot now with these short little driveways, you actually can't, there's nowhere to turn, they just drive straight in and out. So even more so we could just pave where those tyres are going to go and actually get a little bit of green space in the front of one of these little urban infill designs where there's really limited space already to grow anything. So thinking about only paving where necessary. If we do pave, then opting for these permeable surfaces. And this is what, I don't know, I'm just very excited by them. Lots of different ideas, lots of different strategies. Up the top here, we've got kind of a rubber matrix that holds gravel in place, through to a lot of these different brick designs that have sections missing so the water actually can just seep down in between. It does rely on them being laid in the correct way with the correct base and all the different sizes of sand and gravel and the rock that needs to happen to create a void for the water to go into. But I really love it. And there's even this like fancy stone set stuff that looks like the stone set, you know, kind of what the fancy people have. They're beautiful. Does anybody have a stone set driveway? I think they look lovely because there's little stones. It's very natural. It's not just, you know, hard concrete. But you can have them be permeable as well. So I'm just going to show you an example City of Mitcham, my council, I love it when I'm walking my dog around, I'm always coming across more permeable surfaces that they've created in intersections of roadways and footpaths, and it's becoming more popular. So if you haven't seen them in action, I think it's quite so this whole section here of the road is permeable. And you can see already all these tree roots go so far. You probably all know this, but it always amazes me how some people just think the roots aren't really, they're long searching for water all over the place. So all of this vegetation around will benefit from the water being absorbed into the soil here and not just washing away in the stormwater system.
Now it goes. So there's no drainage pits here or nothing, so we'll see how it...
So you can see already that's a lot of water, and it's only now just coming into that stormwater there, but very minimal compared to the amount that's coming out of those taps. It's not even flowing into the stormwater on the side, just that little lip there is enough to stop it just flowing in. And the reason it is going into this stormwater here, I think, is just because of if it was actually a rain event that was going equally along it all, it would be absorbing most of that there. So, yeah. 2,500 litres in 3 minutes, and it's pretty much all absorbed there into that area. So a really beautiful design system, and we can do this in our homes. We can have permeable driveways and permeable surfaces around our homes to make sure that water is sustaining our urban landscapes.
Is that surface useful because it's a go-through road, or is it?
No, the ones that near me, it's just, intersections. And you're seeing it a lot in car parks, which is nice because it stops the water from pooling. So you'll notice this sometimes when you're out and about. It's going to become more and more a common way of how we do things.
So that paving, that's actually a brick type paver, or is it rubber or something?
No, it's just a regular brick. It's just that there's gaps between the bricks, and then instead of filling it with a fine sand, it's actually a coarse sand, and then underneath there's space. So if you were to do this yourself on your driveway, if there's only a certain amount of water that can be absorbed into the system, eventually it might just run off. Yeah, but at least you've kind of had as much as you could take into that system before it did.
I was thinking actually from the point of view of bricks and things are heat sinks. So that you haven't dealt, so the heat, I know we're talking about water, it hasn't dealt with that heat issue that emanates from the bricks.
Yeah. Okay. I guess more water in the system will create a cooler system overall.
What do you need underneath? How do you need to do
Yeah, so this is a quick kind of look, and whether you've got liners or no liners, or whether you've got, a system to remove water into the stormwater, there's so many different ways you can do this. You can have it as it's kind of a detention system that captures the water but lets it kind of slowly enter the stormwater system, or you can have it where there's no liners and it's more like a geotextile kind of fabric where the water can absorb. There's lots of different ways to go about it. This is just one example. The key thing is having these different gradients of from the sand and the pebbles and the gravel of the different sizes to be able to actually create the reservoir and to do that well. Lots of information online, building codes and standards for how to do these things. Again, lots of information on the Water Sensitive Water Sensitive SA website. How am I going for time, Jen? Can I 5 more minutes?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, good. I'll just whip through. The next things we're going to look at are these ideas of trenches and pits and swales and rain gardens. Now these are 4 things that I think all kind of have some overlap. Yeah, they're all just different ways of us capturing water and either helping it to get into the soil system or letting it slowly enter back into the stormwater system, depending on how you create it. So there's this idea of a pit. Has anybody got an infiltration pit? I've only seen one at a friend's house. I don't know if he got permission to do it. You've seen an infiltration pit?
Yeah, sort of.
Yeah, he has it coming off at where there's one of his downpipes from his rain, what do we call them? Just a downpipe from the rainwater, going into a pit that they've built, and they've planted one of their fruit trees near it. So it kind of, water comes, it will fill up this pit, it will slowly absorb into the soil around, and the trees and all the life around will benefit from that. Now, of course, we need to be conscious of how close this is to our house and to other things. So there's lots of codes to do this, and it's much easier if you have a big garden, and much harder if you're on one of those little urban infill spaces. But this idea, just the idea that we can actually have pits and trenches of where water's flowing into, can be really helpful. So yeah, there's these codes. The Development Act 1993 will tell you about sizes and distance and how big they need to be depending on how much area of your roof. There's all the maths is done, but do it well. This is a council example, but the same idea can work in a home scale. So digging the trench, lining with geotextile, laying the ag pipe, filling with the gravel, filling it up, planting on top, or just maybe they leave it in gravel. How do they do that? I don't actually know what they put right on that top bit. Yeah, my apologies there. I can't think of how they finish off the top of that. I've helped dig one of these for a friend down in Tasmania, where he was wanting to divert water. He was on a slope, and they were getting a lot of mould and damp in the basement, in the bottom part of their house. And so we actually dug one of these to divert the water, so that the water coming down, and even water that had seeped into the soil as it moved down the slope, would come into this trench and come around the house and then down away from the house. And so I've helped dig one, but I can't remember how we finished off the top of it. Does anybody know? Has anybody done one of these diversion or infiltration pits or tanks?
I did that around our shed, because the shed floor always got wet in winter. So I dug a trench down, but see, we're on a sloping block, so
Yeah.
the neighbors, I had it go down to the corner, and then it went down this way, but the neighbors
Yeah.
made it back there.
Right. And that's why
But
we
I
need to be
did-
creative.
yeah, so-
Where's the
so
water
I put the
going?
I put the ag pipe, and then I put gravel, and then it just had soil.
Yeah, okay, so you had soil on top. Great. So again, there's lots of how-tos and videos on how to do that. But I guess knowing that these trenches and pits are a possibility, if you've got excess water or an overflow from somewhere, you're like, oh, I would like to actually keep a bit more of that. Maybe one of these tanks, pits or trenches could be the go. Then there's these ideas of swales. Now, I was introduced to swales from an ag farming kind of perspective, on slopes to slow water that's coming down the side to kind of create swales around. The same thing is done in urban environments. There's council examples and home examples, and it's really just channeling the water where you would like it to go. But we do need to make sure that if we're channeling water and using something from our rainwater from the roof, we of course have to be really conscious, if there is a flood event, where's that excess water going to go? We have to have systems in place and overflow strategies to channel that back into the stormwater system. But they take different shapes and forms. So it's really a depression that's planted. They work best where there's slow kind of water coming in evenly into them, and that water can slow down, capture there, cool there, and absorb back into the soil and be used by those plants. Has anybody got a swale? Yeah?
I sort of do ones that like a whole, and it's just it, and then a kind of a little creek that runs out.
Yeah,
That
okay.
goes out. Otherwise, a whole lot would go out.
Yeah, okay. So you've reduced the amount that's going out. And they'll say that that's actually improving the water quality, because when it slows down and it goes through those plants, it actually increases in water quality. That's the premise of the rain gardens that councils are putting in everywhere. It actually is just slowing the water down, reducing the impact on our river systems by having all this water flush out in one go. But it's also cleaning that water with high nitrogen loving plants and different things.
So West Torrens has those structures along some of the roads, like
Yeah.
Stonehouse Avenue.
I love them. They're so good. And also, there's a lot of butterfly habitat and food and plants in those rain gardens, I'm assuming, because there's reeds and things. So we're helping the local ecosystem as well.
Milford Industries has a swale there was a lawn area that they replaced with a rebed site.
Oh, yeah.
And they've got these sawtooth roots and on the factory,
Mm-hmm.
all the water goes into that, but the water comes up into the swale when if there's enough of them.
Yeah, okay.
So
They did put in irrigation system, but the plants never used it.
Wow, great.
This was, how long ago? It's got to be 20 odd years ago since.
This idea of bioswale, it's the same thing here, but it's more about filtration of water down into a system, and the way Melissa explained this is more about a water cleansing system. What I find, people use the term rain gardens. What I might use when I say rain garden might be different from the kind of engineering definition of a rain garden. The kind of water sensitive urban design, a rain garden is very specifically what the councils are using. It's about cleaning water, specific plants, cleaning the water, slowing them down. It's not about creating a garden from rainwater in your garden. But that's technically, I think we can be creative as long as we're really conscious of what the overflow is going to happen and where that's going and meeting our legislative requirements. We can be creative with how we do all of these
So we
things.
have to be aware of the individual soils.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because obviously some soil, you know, if you're on sand, Camden Park, the water can be flooded and it's gone in 3
Yeah.
hours after the rain.
Yeah.
But you get that in, say, the northeastern suburbs with
Yeah.
some of that hard clay.
Yeah.
So it'll be different things with different
That's right.
locations.
Yeah, and knowing, do you have a slope? Are you flat? How much space have you got? What's your roof size? All of those things. So if you are interested in rain gardens, there's lots of information about what plants you can are recommended, the sizing, what to use in your different layers, as well as what, based on the size of your roof, what size rain garden you'd need to be able to absorb and use that system. So here's an example of an above ground losing my words, I'm so sorry everybody. An above ground rain garden.
of 100 metres roof,
Yeah.
2 metres square.
And yeah, lots of designs in how to do those. But rain gardens are really watering from the top. If you're interested in wicking beds, which I am, which I think is a very good water smart solution for growing food, because it has the most water efficient way for us to grow our food, because it's the least evaporation. Anyone here have wicking beds? Sophie Thompson did the best workshop for us recently on wicking beds on the Grow It Local platform. They're basically a garden bed that has a reservoir of water at the bottom, and generally there'll be a little bit of ag pipe sticking up in the corner. You fill up the reservoir through the ag pipe, and then the water is absorbed up from the bottom. So there's no evaporation. You know, we know drippers are better than sprinklers. Well, wicking beds are better than all of them. And what's great is if you need to go away for a week, when you come back, your plants will survive. So this is a system where someone is filling up their wicking bed with rainwater. And as you can see, the rainwater would come down, it's filling up the reservoir, that will fill up, and until the water gets to here, and then the rainwater is going to divert out and just go along the way that it would have. So that's just always going to stay, as long as there's rain, not like we've had January to April, the driest 4 months in 100 years. But generally, with rain, that's going to stay nice and hydrated. So lots of ways we can be creative. So, in summary, yeah, we are going to have less water. We do need to be more creative. There's things that we can do, and some of them are easier on a new build. And it is about hoping that our design codes and building industry slowly in time from council or from community pressure and just changing norms will have a lot more of these things become normal. But there are things we can do in retrofit, from a $4 aerator that we can all just put in our shower head if we want to use less water and in our taps, through to more creative ways that we can use water around our house. If you are redoing a driveway at some time in the future, maybe you will consider some permeable paving. Maybe you can be part of asking your council to get more of this into your systems. I mean, the councils are doing a lot of work on this, but they can always do more, and we can do more. But they do listen to community expectations, so we can be part of a voice that acknowledges that water-sensitive urban design is really important, and to do what we can at home. As I said, lots of information on Water Sensitive SA's website. There's just watersensitivesa.com. Like a lot of websites, it's a bit overwhelming at first, how to find what you want. Just be patient and persistent with it. Have a look around. You'll see resources for community. There's a tab at the top that says resources, and when it drops down, look for community, and then there's all of the stuff, videos and how-to guides. And I just did want to end with the little platypus. As I started, this does link back to the water quality. So when we're looking after how we manage water at home, it does impact our water systems, which we know are so important for sustaining so many animals. And Green Adelaide, it is quite exciting, and looking at rewilding the River Torrens and some other rivers with platypus. Is anybody kind of shocked by this? Or worried?
Yeah,
Worried for the platypus? Yeah. The water quality of the Torrens has come so far. You know, but we still have this idea that the River Torrens water is bad and dirty and polluted. And yeah, it's not perfect, but it has come so far, especially in the last 10 years. So Green Adelaide is doing lots of work with the national specialists on the water quality and looking at different spots where the platypus would potentially do well, and it's looking really positive, is what I'll say. I've come a long way myself in going home. At first I was like, oh, I don't know for those poor platypus, but I realised that actually when you look at the data and look at the results, we've done really well as a community. We've got a long way to go, so there's been lots of opportunities for volunteers to support with helping to reduce weeds and help improve additional habitat for the platypus, and we need to get better at the amount of rubbish that goes into our waterways. Really want kids and adults to understand that when something lands on the ground and then ends up in the waterway, you know, in the stormwater, that's going straight out to the platypus home. Yeah, and make that connection between litter and, you know, that gets washed away. Anyway, I did talk about a lot of things, and I zipped through a lot of things, and I'm not an expert, and there were some things that I said I don't know. If there's anything I mentioned, you're welcome to contact me, and if you can't find something, I'll find you the act or the information or the how-to, and I'm really happy to link you up with the people who might have that more technical information that you might need to take on one of these solutions in your home. So thanks for having me, Jan. I hope that's been some interesting, maybe some things. I hope there's something you might want to take away and do. That's all. Thanks.
Questions?
Well, where do they think it's suitable for introducing this platypus?
Why?
Where?
Oh, where? I don't know yet. It won't be right in the city centre. Probably be upstream.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've seen what the water looks like.
They're actually, platypus are a lot more resilient than what I realised. What I'm learning, for our biodiversity team are working with the platypus experts nationally, and yeah, they're actually, you know, I had this idea that any noise and they won't want to live there. No, they're actually a lot more resilient. We may even still have them in some of the systems that we don't realise. So there's DNA testing happening, there's definitely sightings that people record on the Australian Living Atlas and citizen science reports, but they're actually doing analysis, like DNA testing in the water that's really quite advanced, and we're soon going to have results to know actually in any of the Onkaparinga River or the Torrens or different places, are there actually already platypus? And there's some suggestion that maybe there is, we don't know, fingers are crossed, but yeah, there's lots of work having to actually look at where are we starting, where might they be able to go. Yeah. And when we do a lot of work to benefit something like an iconic species of the platypus, we know that's going to have flow-on benefits to so many other animals. It's not just about the platypus, but it is that great hook.
Not the butterfly.
It is like the butterfly. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, excellent. Yeah.
Sort of like a game.
On behalf of everybody, say thank you. It was just wonderful. The fact that there were hardly any questions shows that you covered all the topics.
Yeah.
And I found it really, really interesting. Because you know, you're all, I don't know about anyone others, but you try and do your little bit. But I've thought of, oh yeah, I could do that. Oh, that's bad. Yeah, well, that's good.
So that's it. You plant some seeds. We can't do it all,
Absolutely.
and different strategies will make more or less sense.
Depending on, because you've got to look at your own situation
Yeah.
and where your water is and the plumbing and the tanks, etc.
Yeah.
So thanks for coming.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
And
And I do